What's going on, everybody? For the 18th straight week, we have our Wednesday midweek Q&A. Once again, as always, these are my opinions. Doesn't make them right. They could easily be wrong. If you disagree, feel free to tell me how you disagree. Just do it nicely in the comments below. Also, if you have a question that you'd like me to feature and respond to in an upcoming episode, it's really easy to do that. Just down below in the comments, ask your question. I choose 5 questions every week. If your question is not chosen this week, please just ask it again the following week. If last week you asked a question and it wasn't answered, ask it again in the comments below this week. I will get to them when there's a question that I see more than once. I tend to try to pick it for that week. So most questions will be answered. It just may not be the first time or the first week that you ask it. So with that said, let's take a look at our first question right now.
I'm paranoid to have my best cards in my house for safety reasons. I live in a nice and safe neighborhood, but would hate to lose my Kofax, Mutual, banks, etc. I mainly keep them in a safe deposit box and never see them. Am I crazy? What do you do?
I really like this question. The reason I like this question is it's something that I think that we all think about and consider, and we really should think about it and consider it. There's these things, and we like them, and we don't want anything to happen to them. We want to care for them. And so, of course, we're going to be concerned that something can happen. Now, in reading the question, it sounds to me like you're more concerned by saying you live in a safe area of them being stolen or your house being broken into, not worried as much about like a fire. So if that's your main concern, my advice would be, it really depends on how do you look at your cards. Do you look at your cards as an investment of something that you've spent a lot of money on that you want to go up in value, or is it something that you're a collector of? If you collect cards, the whole point of owning them is to look at them. So if they're sitting in a safe deposit box, you don't get to enjoy them. So as a collector, you want to enjoy them, and you don't get to enjoy them. So what's really the point of even having them? So I would look for an alternative over a safe deposit box. Now, if you have a T206 Honus Wagner card, I think it should probably be in a safe deposit box. But the cards we're talking about here have a lot of value, but it's not life-changing value if something were to happen. So here's kind of my, what I do. I have a safe, right? Just like a gun safe. Thick-walled, heavy safe that can be bolted to the foundation of the house. It's not something that somebody could remove without needing a serious amount of time to make that happen. To me, that's probably the alternative you should be looking to over the safe deposit box, because I'm assuming you want to enjoy your cards. And you don't get to enjoy them right now. So what's really the point? So to me, a really thick-walled, gun safe that gives you plenty of storage for a lot of cards, and you don't really have to worry about a burglary affecting that. Now, is that 100% foolproof? No. Something could still happen, but the chances of it happening go way, way, way down, right? I would probably have any card that has a decent amount of value in a safe like that. Now, at the same time, you can also get insurance policies to cover antiques and collectibles and things like this. So you can do that. You can get a rider into your insurance policy, and depending on how much your collection is worth, that's probably something that some people should consider doing. Personally, I don't have that because I don't think that my collection meets the threshold of doing that, because when you start factoring in things like your deductible on your insurance policy and you have to make a claim because something does happen, so you have to factor all that stuff in. But to me, I would go away from the safe deposit box unless it's a really, really expensive card, talking like $20,000 or more. Everything else personally, you're asking my opinion. My opinion, what I do, I have a safe at home. If it's bolted to the ground, it's not like somebody's going to be able to just come in and haul that thing away. And I'd consider an insurance policy based on the values that you have. So that would be my recommendation. But make sure you're enjoying the cards that you've got, because that's really the whole point of this, right? You got to enjoy the cards. So I would definitely change my setup if it was me. That's what I do when I give advice. The advice is what I do. That's what I do. Don't have an insurance policy yet, but I do have the safe.
I feel we have only scratched the surface on pre-war vintage. In your opinion, do you feel we will see more available for sale in the next 5 years?
So you're talking my language. The more that I learn about pre-war stuff and the more that I look at it, the more I pay attention to it, the more I research it, the more I like it. And for me, it's not something that is going to become less interesting to people. I think it's going to become more interesting to people. So the question is asking, do I think it'll be more available? Well, I don't think we're going to start having more and more finds of pre-war cards, because we're talking about cards now that are pretty much nearing 100 years old. So that generation that collected those are pretty much now with us at this point. And the generation who may have gotten those from the people who did originally collect them, we're starting to lose those people as well. I don't think there's suddenly going to be this influx of pre-war finds that are happening. So I don't think that's going to happen. As far as it being available, I'm not understanding or sure why it would be more available. I don't think that it's going to become more available. I think if anything, it might become less available. I think the cards from the 50s and the 60s are the most popular because they're the names that we know. And I think a lot of people have collected a lot of those and do collect a lot of those. But once they've kind of filled that portion of their collection, I don't think they're going to start going, oh, well, now I'll go to the 70s. I think they're going to go to the rarer stuff, not the less rare thing. And so I think people are going to go further and further and further back. So in my opinion, I think the prices of that stuff is going to go up. I also think that the prices of that stuff is not just going to go up because the demand for it's going to go up, but I think as time goes by, things happen, and the small supply that are out there, things happen to them, right? There are incidents that will happen where those cards will go missing, they'll go destroyed, they'll get lost, they'll get tossed, they'll get anything that happens. So I do agree, we've just scratched the surface on pre-war stuff for a lot of us that are collectors of vintage cards, because our focus has been the 50s and the 60s. I think more and more of us are starting to look further and further back. And I also think another reason why that stuff is going to get in a higher price point is because I do think there are lots of people that are continuing to re-enter the hobby. The people that came back during the pandemic I don't think, are just going to go away. I think they're back, and I think they're back for good. And I think more people are slowly starting to come back, and more people are entering the hobby. So I think that stuff is going to be harder to get, not easier to get. I think the prices are going to go up, and it's something that I'm really interested in and I'm trying to learn a lot more about. So yeah, I think it's a place to start looking to add to your collection.
I feel that the sports card hobby has become a slab card flipping stocks type of hobby. We've gotten away from the blood and guts of what collecting meant. How do you feel towards the hobby as a whole today?
So I think we all agree what you're saying about card flipping. I wouldn't really compare it to stocks and bonds as much as I'd compare it to cryptocurrency and day traders. I mean, people are trying to buy on a little dip and then sell on a lot of peak. And what's happening that I see is, I mean, there's tons of YouTubers that are doing modern cards. And in a lot of those videos, they'll buy a card one day and sell it that day or the next. In a weekend, they'll be buying cards and selling them, lots of those. And if you just do a little margin, and this is the reason they go, oh, I bought a $5,000 card, or I invested $10,000 in this card or something. Because if you can get a 10% margin on a $10,000 card, that's $1,000 that they made. If you can get a 10% margin on a $5,000 card, that's $500 that they made. So they're literally playing that musical chairs of when the music stops, meaning the player is no longer hot, or the player is, gets hurt, or the player gets benched. They don't want to be stuck with the card. So this hot potato game that they're playing is they're taking slabbed cards, they're buying them using relationships that they have, or using cash because somebody is looking for a different opportunity, buying it at a little bit of a price reduction, and then immediately selling it, and selling it at a, like a 10% margin. And if you do that with $20,000 worth of cards over a weekend, you can make quite a bit of money in that weekend, right? If you can make a 10% margin in a weekend, if you can buy a card at 80% value, sell it at 90% value, you just made a 10% margin. And if you did that on $20,000 worth of cards, you just made $2,000. The problem is it doesn't take too many times for these people to get burned to lose a lot of money. I mean, if we look back over the last, 5 to 10 years, let's just say the last 5 years, at some of the prospects and where they are now, I mean, there were people paying a lot of money for Johnny Manziel's and Baker Mayfield's. And last summer, there was Davis Mills was a guy. And, Trey Lance is still kind of like in this, this tough spot. There's so many guys that people were spending huge amounts of money on. And I mean, there are people investing in buying all these cards of two different quarterbacks for the Patriots right now. It's like, well, they can't both be playing. So why are the point that I'm trying to make is that it's absolutely happening that people are flipping slab cards, but it's almost always with modern. And the reason it's almost always with modern is because the potential, the hotness of a newer player, the peaks shoot up sharp and the valleys dive quickly. But that's not happening with Nolan Ryan cards. It's not happening with Hank Aaron or Willie Mays or Mickey Mantle. Those are stable. You're not seeing people flipping Mickey Mantle cards or flipping Hank Aaron cards because they're stable. So when you see that stuff happening, it's almost always with modern cards. And if you look over the last 2 or 3 years at who were the hot guys, who were the hot players that everyone was going over. I mean, Mac Jones, right? I mean, there are some people that think Mac Jones isn't even going to be the starter at the end of the season this year. People are spending huge amounts of money on Jackson Holiday. And the guy can't even buy a beer at a bar right now. So how are we spending thousands of dollars on a guy's card when we don't have any idea what he's going to be? That's the problem. It's happening. I'd stay away from it. I'd encourage you to stay with the stability of vintage cards, because that's really the true collecting, and not the game of hot potato that a lot of people are doing. As soon as I see those guys, as soon as I see the Jeff Wilsons of the world, and I don't even want to start getting into calling people out, but as soon as those new card flipper guys start taking those cards and putting them in their safe in a big pile and hoarding those players, that's not going to happen, because they don't really believe in those guys. They just see a short-term flip and a short-term money. amount to be earned. So I'd stay away from that. That's a dangerous game. That could be a very expensive game.
With all the controversy in the card grading industry, what are your thoughts on Tag, the first computer grading company?
I find tag grading to be a really, really interesting concept. And quite frankly, I think that we are probably going to be moving in that direction. You know, as time goes by, it's like referees make mistakes. Like, they're trying their best, they're doing a pretty darn good job. Umpires, referees, they make mistakes. So, and that's why we now have instant replay. And as technology improves and we can do replays and we can do, things, even like with the World Cup, you can see whether the ball crossed the goal line by an inch. So what we now do is we look at, is there offsides by an inch by this computer process? I mean, Wimbledon years ago started having the beep when when a serve was a fault, and that was like this crazy thing because we're going away from the human eye and the errors involved. I mean, will umpiring in Major League Baseball for balls and strikes move to computerized? I think that it probably will. I think that we'll continue to do those things and move toward those things because the error rate is smaller and because the computerized systems are getting better. And quite frankly, because it's cheaper to buy those computer systems than to pay people. The most expensive cost with any company is payroll. It's paying for the humans. That's why when we walk into a McDonald's nowadays, there is a keypad for you to do the order. It's not because it's fun. It's because now they don't need to pay as many people to take orders. So it saves them money in the long run. So something like tag grading, where they can just have a person just sliding cards into a machine or under some sort of device, camera device, and they can scan it and grade it, it's going to save them money. There's no doubt that we're moving that way. And I don't think it is unreasonable to think that some of the companies might actually already be doing that. I mean, what makes us think that PSA is not using some AI technology? We don't know. There's no transparency, so they might be doing that. There might be a hybrid, system in place. But the tag grading, I think, is definitely going to be expanded. I think a lot of the grading companies are going to start to adopt more of those things because it's going to save money and it's going to improve accuracy. So yeah, I think, will tag be the one? Quite frankly, I think a company like PSA will probably buy out a company like that and call themselves doing a hybrid where they use human eye and they use a system like that to catch other things that maybe they're not seeing at first. I think it's coming. I think it might already, in some cases, partly already be happening. But yeah, I think that that's where we're heading, and I think we need to be aware of it. I think it's inevitable.
Years ago, I purchased commons from the 1986 Fleer basketball set. 3 of the cards came back as a PSA 10 grade. Do you expect them to maintain their extraordinary values?
Okay. So this is a great question, and it's happened in other sets. It's happened in other years. It's happened in other sports. It's going to continue to happen, but there are always going to be people who want to put together the best possible set. So somebody's going to want to have a 1986 Fleer basketball PSA 10 set and every card to be a 10. Somebody wants that, right? And because somebody wants it, if there's only 1 or 2 or 3 10s out there, they're going to pay big money to get a 10, even of a common, just so that they can have one of them to have the best set in the world. It's going to happen. There are people with virtually unlimited funds, and they are going to continue to want to have something that nobody else has. Now, there are never going to be less PSA 10s than there currently are. So if we're looking at the 1986 Fleer basketball set and you have a Jeff Malone rookie card and it's graded as a 10 and there's only, say, 3 of them, that card is going to be worth a lot of money because there's more than 3 people that want a perfect PSA 10 set. So they're going to pay an outrageous amount of money for it. There's never going to be 2 PSA 10 Jeff Malones unless somebody's house burns down and the card's inside. So we're not going to go from 3 to 2, but we might go from 3 to 4 or 3 to 5 or 3 to 10 or 3 to 50. Even as hard as PSA is grading right now, or any of them, they've all gotten a little bit tougher. There's not going to be less 10s. There will only be more 10s. And if there are more 10s, of course, the price is going to come down. Now, we say, why aren't there more 10s? Are there really only going to be 3 10s? No. Most people aren't sending in 1986 Fleer Jeff Malones to be graded because it costs $20 to grade the card. And right now, as the card sits, it might be worth a couple of dollars. Now, if it got a 10, then it's worth a lot of money, but the chances of it getting 10 aren't that high. If it gets a 9, you might break even. So there aren't a ton of people that are sending that card in, but if there are only 3 or 4 out there, and the 3 or 4 out there are selling for, let's just say, $3,000 each, there might be some more people willing to take a crack at sending that card in for $20 and getting a 10. Will it get a 10? Probably not. Will some get a 10? Of course. So as the price of the existing 10s jumps, more people will take a shot at sending theirs in to get the 10. And then with that, the population will go up. And with the population going up, the price will go down because those people out there that want that perfect 10 set will have more at their disposal to buy. So if it was me, if I had a card that was a common and it was a 10, I think the price has more chance of going down over the next 10 years than up, because I think the population has a pretty decent chance of going up. So if it was me, I'd sell those cards now. But could they be worth way more in 5 years? Of course. But to me, I look at it and go, I think the population is going to go up. If the population goes up, the price is going to go down. If the price goes down, I should sell now. That's my perspective. That's what I would do if I had a couple of 1986 Fleer Commons in PSA 10 holders. They would be hitting eBay tonight.
All right, if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. And take a second to post your question for next week below.